Hey guys, Dan Bradbury here, and in this week's episode of the Dan Bradbury podcast, I'm super excited to be helping you discover what to do next. Here's what I mean: with our recent launch of our new business valuation and audit tool, it's caused people to see inside their business in a whole new way. Link will be in the show notes. But ultimately, it's like, well, what do I do next to move my business forward? And the real question is, how do you decide? How do you figure out? How do you deduce what the best thing to do is? And in this episode, I'm going to take you behind the scenes with some of our mastermind members that's showing you how to do that. We're going to use the tool to analyze their business and how it shows up differently in different businesses so you get the maximum upside for the least amount of effort. If you like this episode, this Friday is the deadline for the last 2 remaining guest tickets for our mastermind experience. If you want to find out more about that, go to danbradbury.com/ME, i.e. mastermind experience. danbradbury.com/ME. And with that, let's get to the show. Welcome to this skill session. And today we're going to talk about arguably the most important thing that you need to know in your business. And that is identifying the most important tasks that you've got to do, Sonia. Because the reality is, for small business owners, there's always more things to do than there is time. There's always more places where you can place or invest your money, Steve, than you've got spare capital. So in this session, we're going to talk about precisely how to do that. So, i.e., how do you identify what the most important things to do in your business are right now, David, that give you the best bang for your buck? Because you've got finite time, finite capital, and other resources. What's going to give you the best leverage, the best upside? So, here's a way of saying it. Look, creating a to-do list is easy. There's not a single person on this call that doesn't have a to-do list that's like longer than anything you can imagine, right? So having a list of stuff to do is the easy bit. In fact, there's plenty of tools and resources that will suggest things for you to do, or you can do analyses of your business that will kind of give you, suggestions about what to do. But how do you truly discern that analysis? So for some of you on this call, you've already seen this, but I'm super excited about a new tool. I created a kind of a 3-minute business audit and valuation tool. So it analyzes your business in 6 different areas. And based upon that analysis, it will give your company a valuation, a suggested valuation and a valuation range, and a list of tasks that it would suggest that you do, Steve, in order to move through to the next step. Thank you, Sonia. I think it's very good as well. But I am a smidge biased, right? And by the way, that bias is something that we've all got to eliminate, because when it comes up to coming up with a to-do list, right? When it comes up with coming up with you get a to-do list. If a person's got the only tool they have is a hammer, they treat everything like a nail, right? So we end up being skewed in terms of bias. And I'm going to give you a really interesting example of that in just a second. So this valuation tool asks you a series of true/false statements about your business, and it will give you strategic insights about what to do next. Okay. However, once you've got a big to-do list, and hello, Darren, it's going to give you a big problem, right? Which one do you do first? Because I don't know about you guys, but I find, Steve, often that if I'm trying to do a bit of everything, I make no bloody progress anywhere. Right? So really, Paul, the leverage is in what's the thing that's going to give you the greatest upside. Some call it the domino effect, right? Or a different way of calling it would be the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule. Okay? But how do you decide which tasks are the top 20%? Because that's when people default to their bias, and that's often not the case, right? So they end up trying to market stuff to death when more marketing isn't what they need, right? I had a business a long time ago, about 15 years ago, where the marketing and sales was best in class in its little tiny industry, Steve. But Suzanne, the problem was that I couldn't grow beyond a certain revenue. And back then that was about $500,000 in sales. And I kept saying, you know what, I need better, more advanced sales and marketing. But that wasn't the problem, because that wasn't the weak link. But I kept falling back onto my bias about what was I just had a hammer. So I treated everything as a nail. So look, when you go and do some kind of analysis of your business, or you get feedback from an expert or whatever, you get the results, you get the feedback, but it's just that their results. And by the way, Paul, if you want to have a look, feel free to use the QR code on the left if you want to use that free audit and business valuation tool. But I'm going to give you some examples of that in a minute. But if you think about these results, Suzanne, it's kind of like the results you get from a blood test. So if you go and get a blood test, and for those that don't know me very well, I'm away from business. I'm super fanatical about my health. So give me any health-related doohickey, and I will sign up for that thing, and I will give it. I'll give it a fair crack. But you get all this data, right? Oh, you get your blood sugar levels, you get your cholesterol, you get your blood pressure, you get your HRV, you get whatever it is, right? And it's just data. So if somebody says, oh, your cholesterol is 20. Well, is that good or bad? Oh, your blood pressure is 170. Well, 170 over what? Good or bad? And the only reason if any of you are hearing numbers and going, oh, that's good or that's bad, is because you got a reference point to compare it against, right? So the value is not in the data. The data, David, is just table stakes. A different example, you having a P&L is critical, right? But having the P&L just enables you to do the next step. You need a P&L. You need it in order to do the bit where the value really comes from. And the real value comes from the interpretation of those results. You can get the whole blood panel done. But if you don't have somebody that's trained, that understands how to read those panels, what normal range should look like, and are you inside or outside of those ranges, you don't know what to do. Right? So it's the interpretation of those results where all the value resides. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And so for that, I'm going to jump off this slide deck and I'm going to go into a screen share of some scorecards. So if and I should have inserted these in the slide deck, but I did not. So let me jump on over here. So first of all, guys, just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Yep. So you should see this is the business audit valuation tool. So Sonia, as you know, analyzes you in 6 different areas, right? So once you've gone to the URL, you've done it, you'll end up with a result like this, okay? And it's going to ask you however many, several dozen questions. The number of questions it asks you actually is relative to how strong or weak you are in a particular area. And then you'll end up on this page where it'll give you a valuation, right? And there's 2 sides of this, Suzanne, that I want to kind of break down, okay? The left-hand side is this kind of wheel of life, or rather, Matthew, the wheel of business, which is your business scored from 0 to 4 in each of those 6 areas that you can see on the screen. And the right-hand side gives you an estimated valuation, okay? And it will also give you a range. So in the example you can see on the screen, you've got a business that would be valued at the low end at 200,000 and at the top end it might be valued at $1 million. And I want to explain how it comes up with that valuation, because it's going to give us insight, Paul, about how do we read the results, okay? So in other words, the left-hand side, in this business, because it scored a 0 in operations, but it scored a 4 in marketing, for example, overall, all those data points calculates that this business is at 41.75% of its potential for its current size, right? So it'd be 100% if it scored 4 out of 4 in each of those 6 areas, okay? So said differently, Paul, your valuation is written down by each piece of that Trivial Pursuit pie that you're missing, okay? On the right-hand side, it uses 3 different bits of data in order to come up with your valuation. So it takes that percentage of your business potential and then it multiplies it through what your EBITDA is, which simplistically, for those that don't know, let's just call it profit before tax. It's not exactly the same, but let's just call it profit before tax. And what your balance sheet equity position is, also known as net assets. So what it does is it uses your industry, the industry that you say that you're in, and different industries have different ranges of multiples, right? So in this example, I've got a professional service business that had 100,000 in profit, right? This was my business roughly 15 years ago, or one of my businesses. And the range of multiples of profit that your business will sell for in that industry might hover between 2 and I have seen as high as 10, depends on how well the business is established. Okay, and then all this tool does, Suzanne, is it takes that range of multiples, it uses the wheel of business to calculate where you're going to fall on that multiple, i.e. are you at the lower end of that range? Or, Steve, are you at the higher end of that range or somewhere in the middle, depending on how strong your business is? It'll multiply that by the profit and add the balance sheet net assets, and voila, you've got your valuation. Here's the point. You can use this, Matthew, for what you need to do in your business next. So let me illustrate it with this example, and then I'll flip over, and I've got 4 of you that are on this call's examples that are pulled up here, and I'm going to do do the business valuation equivalent of a what do you call it? Crystal ball gazing, Sonia, when you go and have your fortune read as to what needs to be done next. So I filled in this questionnaire as though it was me 15 years ago, when I had a business that was epically strong at sales and marketing, but weak in the other areas. And you can see you got a business that's got the full deck on marketing, 3 out of 4 on sales, and it scored 1s in finance, legal, and people, and a 0 on operations. And yet, Sonia, it's kind of obvious when you look at it through this lens. I had a business where I was trying to solve everybody's problem by marketing better marketing, drive more sales, and then I wondered why I was never able to grow my revenue. I was hitting my head on a ceiling. Right, Paul? That's exactly what was going on. Because I wasn't looking at it this way. And I clearly needed to go, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So, Paul, for me, what I had to do was, in this business, I first had to dial in operations. So it was less buddy dependent upon me. Then I needed to strengthen the people, then the finance and the legal. Right? So that's the simplistic example. Right? So what I'm looking for are the different patterns that you've got, Steve, for your scorecard will tell us where we need to dig. And I'll give you other data points as well, which I'm going to reference when I use your examples. So before I go into using your some of your businesses as real life examples, and I'm happy to take one on the fly as well, as to how you decide what you need to do next, David. Any questions on that kind of brief overview or framework? Are we good? All right. That either means I'm boring you to tears or you're all absolutely spellbound. I'm going to optimistically say it's the latter. So if I come back over here, I'm going to look at, and by the way, I believe you let us know and we asked if we could use you and it's all good. If I start talking about your business, you don't want me to talk about your business on this Zoom call, then please let me know. You can drop it in the chat and I will loop it out. But as you can see, I've got 4 scorecards already lined up. Okay, so first of all, we've got Gordon Forestry Limited's business valuation. And so here you can see a business, which I'll actually do the right-hand side first, okay? Interestingly, I don't think their industry is retail, but I'm going to guess, Steve, that's because you didn't find one that you deemed to be most suitable.
I certainly don't remember clicking retail. I would have hopefully guessed at something a bit more applicable. But anyway, I'll let you choose something that's a bit more applicable.
Yeah, well, good. Well, you tell me. Let's do this live. Of this list, which
I would say professional services.
Yeah, I can get
probably.
I could get on board with that. In fact, yeah, understand what you do. Well, for those on the call, why don't you give us a 10-second summary of what the business does for those that don't know, Steve?
We provide forest management services for forest owners. So big estates, forest owners, investors, we provide a planning service and implementation service for them.
Yeah, great. So I love this. So by the way, I just changed your industry and click recalculate value, and your valuation's gone up by a little bit. Because actually your profit, your balance sheet net assets, and your business scorecard are the biggest variables, but the sector you are in will affect it. And it's made your valuation a little bit higher. Now, actually, I'll ask this up front, Steve, and you're okay to decline to answer, or don't know is an acceptable answer to make you feel comfortable. But out of curiosity, this is basically valuing you at the business at £1 million. Is that above or below or about right as to what you feel that your business is worth?
I'm absolutely honest, I didn't know, and this is something that's on my task list is to get a better handle on what that actually is.
Okay, great. So I'll talk through what I see, and feel free to disagree with me, right? But this is how I would read this. Of course, I've got background and know a little bit more about your business than some people on this call will. But if you look at the scorecard, you see a business where you go right hand side. Okay, professional services. It's profitable. It's got kind of low six-figure profits. It's got a solid balance sheet. As in a lot of professional services business, you'll see with a balance sheet of 0. Which is, again, it's okay. It's context specific. But a lot of professional services don't need any equity in the balance sheet, so they don't carry any. So effectively, your business is valued at approximately 3.5 times the profit plus those balance sheet net assets, i.e. the equity that Steve has in his business of £450,000. So said a different way, you could say you're getting paid circa £500,000 for the goodwill of your business, but you get to have what you have on the balance sheet as well. Okay. Now, but if I look on the right hand side, I'm going to go, okay, let's look a bit deeper into the business. You've got a business that scores a 0 for sales and marketing. Its strongest area is level 2, which is legal, where it's got a 2 on this kind of 5-point scale of 0 through 4. Okay. So legally, it's strongest. Okay. It's not epically strong, but that's where it's kind of middle of the road. It's got 1s in finance, people and operations, and 0 in sales and marketing. So as soon as you look at a business like this, you're going to go, okay, this is a business that probably is functional, not perfect, but is functional, right? It's pretty solid, pretty stable. You know, if I didn't know, Steve, you would probably guess this is a business that's been established a reasonable length of time and it's not going anywhere. However, it's got excess capacity. This is a business whereby actually they don't have a good route to market. But in theory, if you could turn the tap on of quality leads into this business could handle significantly more revenue. Which, to be clear, Sonia, sometimes the inverse is true. You've got businesses where their operations are super weak and sales and marketing is strong. And actually, if you double the client base, the business is going to implode because it can't handle that excess volume of clients. Well, that's not what I'm seeing here. What you're seeing is the weak link is in the ability to acquire customers. So that's my super simplistic high level diagnosis. Steve, am I
fairly on the mark there. I suppose the one thing that this doesn't do though, and you can't really do it, but is in terms of the operations where we have all the systems there, but systems and things in place and don't necessarily reflect capacity. So
that's fair.
From what you were saying there, we could fire on more sales and marketing, but the question is, do we have the capacity? Probably do, but it doesn't really indicate that though.
That's fair. So I'll tell you how I would read this next, right? So for everyone here, as we relate it to your scorecards, I kind of go, okay, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Okay, so the weakest links in this one are sales and marketing. So I would be inclined to come down here, right, to sell the sales and marketing sections, and it will give suggestions. Okay, so in other words, it'll give it for all 6 areas, but I would look at sales and marketing first. Marketing's here and sales here. So I'm going to say, okay. And again, I'll make a prediction, Stephen, then you tell me if this would be helpful or not. So I'm going to go, okay, there's not clarity about who the ideal customer is, and we don't have a clear source of generating a steady flow of qualified leads. And that tie in with, there's not dedicated resource to acquiring new sales or a process or a way of tracking that pipeline. So if I was to chunk all that together, Sonia, I go, okay, now the nature of Steve's business is it's not an e-commerce business. So this isn't a business where you go and turn on some Facebook ads and you run people through a sales funnel. That's not how this type of business works. However, I would imagine, Steve, that your processes for managing the operation are significantly superior than if I was to come into this business, what I would look to do is say, okay, how do I identify 100 businesses, 100 estates that kind of fit the profile for our ideal type of clients? How do I acquire, or do I build up or create a list of those 100 ideal clients? And then what is the process through which I'm going to market to those people in order to get a percentage of those 100 to respond? I.e., what is the direct mail I'm sending out? What are the email messages? What are the phone calls that I'm going to make? So what is the process that I'm going to follow in order to commit resource, a person's time? That might be you, it might be a member of your team, it might be somebody that you hire on a temp or a perm basis to go, right, their job is to work that 100 leads into getting the hands in the air for the next stage in your sales process, right? And obviously Steve hasn't mentioned it. It's said in the scorecard that he doesn't have it. The fact is he does have it, he's just perhaps not very crystal clear, or it's not internally articulated, which is people don't just sign up and become clients, Steve. Yes, they inquire, you speak with them on the telephone, you go down to meet them, you look around, you do a review in order to do some kind of proposal based upon the size of the estate and their particular needs, one would guess. And then on that proposal, then it's like, okay, then that's when the marketing transitions into the sales. Once they've inquired and you're now in a conversation about, we might be interested in you doing this, now it becomes a sales process. That's the kind of crossover. And these two areas are weak, Sonia, and you could say, all things being equal, Steve should start on marketing first, because if you've got no leads, the sales process doesn't count. But that's probably how I would determine between these two weakest areas, Steve, is to say, well, actually, if we've got no leads at all, we've got to start there, because that's further back in the sales process, Suzanne. However, if Steve goes, well, yeah, well, actually, we've built up loads of contacts and I have a small database of people over time, but they're just sat there, then I might start on the sales element, right? Even though it's still shades of grey, Sonia, because you still have to go, okay, well, I need to get these people reinterested because they're just emails on my database now, so I know who they are. But the question is, how do I get 5 of them to agree to meet me face to face so I can come and do some kind of review in order to generate a proposal, right? So it's very simple, Steve, and the devil's in the detail. But my guess would be that is the low-hanging fruit for you in your business. Let me pause there. Feedback to me. Agree, disagree, somewhere in the middle, and then we can debate around the.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. That, to be absolutely honest, we've clients find their way to us rather than the opposite way around. So it's a bit of they come to us by accident, whereas we don't have an active process, but we need to. We can see maybe some of our existing client work falling off, but we don't have this pipeline of potential new clients coming to us. So it needs to be a priority for us.
Yes, and so let me ask it this way. And again, reminder, it's okay to decline to answer if you don't wish to. You spoke about the systems, so let's speak about the operations, because you're right. We didn't identify. Do you have the capacity? But let me just ask you. So, what percentage could your revenue increase by before you go, no, actually, our systems don't work?
Oh no, I think our systems would work for double the current sales. If we added on additional staff, then those systems would absolutely work, because we focused quite a lot this last year on those systems and consistency and how we deliver things.
Perfect.
So I think we've now put those building blocks in place to be able to cope with it.
Yeah, perfect. And by the way, that makes sense to me. So, if you think about something what we said there, we said, okay, all right. So there are operations, there are the systems in place via operations, and if the revenue doubled, of course, we're going to need to acquire some other people. But that's not the thing that's preventing that from happening. In other words, Paul, this is not a business where it goes, oh my God, the problem is we can't onboard these new clients, right? Versus your business, Paul, where, a few months ago you go, no, actually, it's not the right time. We are absolutely flooded. Speaking to you in October, November, we are flooded with more work than we can throw a stick at, and we're just trying to keep the wheels on the bloody thing. The week, it wouldn't have been ideal at that point. You could have had the best clients in the world and it would have been difficult to onboard them. That's not the case in Steve's business. We're going, okay, sales and marketing. So the low-hanging fruit, Steve, feels to me around, okay, well, I need to identify it's probably marketing first, not sales, but it's like, okay, who is this list? Who is my dream 100 clients? And then what is the process that we're going to follow to nurture these to the point that they're willing to have a meeting? And of course, the linchpin of that is first on the list of sales is like, okay, who is the resource that we're going to be dedicated? And the point I want to make, Matthew, is depending on where your business is at and the size, sometimes the answer is you, Suzanne. It's you that needs to do this. And then it gets handed off. However, sometimes you're going to go, no, it can be delegated from the get-go. Sometimes businesses are stuck. It doesn't necessarily meet this business's profile, but it's possible that you're going to go, okay, the problem is they don't have a person. So the sales weakness is caused by a lack of people focused in that area. And therefore, the thing that Steve needs to decide is, okay, does the existing team and the resources he's got, is it about allocating some more of that time, his time or his team's time, to doing that task? Is that the right thing to do? As in, do they have the capacity and is that appropriate? Or is it going, no, everybody's slammed? Literally, the leverage in this business comes from when we hire a person, park them in front of these tasks and just say, have at it. Right? Because they acquire a customer, Steve, and I would guess in your business, the average customer sticks for years.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so the profits that are generated off that multi-year contract length or multi-years in whether or not it's contracted are significant. So the return on that sales resource, if they're even moderately effective, is probably whopping. So that I'm probably going to leave this one there, Steve, unless there's any particularly burning questions from you.
No, that's useful. Really useful.
All right, thank you. So to kind of wrap this up, I'd say, look, the scorecard, my belief is, even though it's just a tool, I think it might be a useful lens because, David, if you up your valuation on this tool, so you can genuinely answer the questions the same way in a month's time and you've leveled up in a few areas, I strongly believe that would correlate on average over time to an increase in the valuation if you were to exit the business. And even if you're not looking to exit the business, David, even if you're keeping it in the family, you get to keep that value because that valuation for your business, Sonia, is just a proxy for the net present value of the future cash flows. So said a different way, David, if your business is worth more on paper today, it means you're going to get more money over time if you keep the business, right? More money, less stress. So I do think it's a useful tool and feel free to play around with it, answer the questions differently, change around with the valuation so you can see what you would get. And for me, Steve, I dive into, okay, what are the weakest scoring areas? You're only as strong as the weakest link. The business will implode around the weakest link. Up that, if all else fails, rather than arguing the toss, I'd just say level up in those lowest scoring areas and then loop back to me and tell me. If you still disagree with me, I'll apologise profusely. But I'm pretty confident we'll do you well to get you unstuck. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to find out more about the audit tool, link will be in the show notes. If you want to claim one of our last 2 remaining guest tickets for a mastermind experience, the deadline is this Friday for the event coming up later this month. Go to danbradbury.com/ME and I will see you there. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 steps to improving your profits and cash flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.